video, I discussed dark academia as literary genre, what it fails to portray, what it portrays quite well, and what we as readers would like to see in this so-called genre in the future. In that very same video, I told you all about how I will be talking about 5 very popular books in the dark academia genre in the future. This is the first video in a series of videos where I'll be talking about, as I said, 5 popular dark academia books. In this video, I'll be discussing The Secret History by Donna Tartt and If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is RupkathaBhattacharjeeofficial and you're watching my channel, which is named after me because I have an inherent lack of creativity. The Secret History by Donna Tartt is arguably the book that gave rise to the entire dark academia aesthetic. I don't think that it is possible to constructively discuss the dark academia genre without even referencing The Secret History by Donna Tartt. The Secret History by Donna Tartt is told through the eyes of young Richard Papin, a man pursuing pre-med at his hometown of Plano, California. But as the days pass by, he finds himself more disheartened with what he is doing. He is unsatisfied by the pace at which his life is moving, and he does not really enjoy what he is pursuing right now, which is the very reason why he decides to apply for a scholarship at the elite Hampden College. When his scholarship is granted, he moves to Hampden in New England, a few hours away from his hometown of California, and he starts pursuing literature there. During his time at Hampden, he meets this very enigmatic and charismatic group of classic students who study under a Professor Julian Morrow, who apparently does not accept any students who study under any other professor other than himself. As Richard observes these group of students, he slowly grows infatuated with them and he yearns to join their very tight-knit group. And therefore, he does what Julian Morrow wants him to. He quits literature and shifts his degree for a third time to classics, telling himself that perhaps third time is the charm for him. When he and his group of friends start going through their days together, the group slowly dismantles and falls into disarray when they murder one of their very close friends, Bunny or Edmund Corcoran. Donna Tartt subverts the traditional murder mystery in this novel. Now, when we talk about a traditional murder mystery, we usually believe that the book is going to be about who killed the person who has been murdered, who is the murderer. Donna Tartt very skillfully subverts that trope by making a murder mystery about why did they kill this person? And I say that she is not only one of the most prolific but also one of the most skillful authors who has ever attempted to do so. The Secret History by Donna Tartt is by all means a modern classic, and I truly see why so many people call it one of the best books that they have ever read. No, I wouldn't go as far as to call it one of the best books I've ever read, but it is up there. Now, it might not be a very well-known fact, but The Secret History is in fact a satire. And one of the things that I do find most interesting and morbidly funny is how most of the dark academia craze, like I like to call it, is based on misinterpretations of The Secret History. One of the most popular interpretations of dark academia, whenever people do discuss it, is that it revolves around the romanticism of elitism and the romanticism of classism and somewhat ivory tower education, as many people do like to call it. All of that is not at all The Secret History's fault, because The Secret History at its core is not only a satire but also a revenge fantasy. It is based on Donna Tartt's own time in Bennington College, where she was discriminated against by her upper-class male peers, not only because of her gender but also because of her background from a low-income household. When Donna Tartt writes The Secret History, she writes it with a lot of subtlety. The theme of fatal flaws is a big one in Secret History, and the fatal flaw of our main character is his longing for the picturesque and his need for perfection. He is haunted by this flaw of his to such a degree that he overlooks the wrongdoings of his close friends, because he has romanticized these friends of his to such a degree that he believes them to be the embodiment of what humanity should be, or the embodiment of what the ancient Greeks wanted their descendants to be. Most of the times he feels that they are so perfect that whatever they do, especially Henry Winter and Camilla Macaulay, he feels that whatever they do must be right because of his own romanticized view of them. But as a reader, when you read the book yourself, you will find that some of these people are downright stupid, because the very character that Richard Papin views as some sort of troubled genius is also the same man who believes that the moon landing was faked. At its core, the secret history critiques isolation. It tries to portray that extreme isolation from society, extreme isolation from the common people will only lead to tragedy. It is not meant to be read as a Bible of upper class learning, but rather a statutory warning. What I found most interesting while reading The Secret History is comparing it to the modern day rise of the dark academia circles, where it is somehow treated as guide as to what learning should be, rather than a warning for what you should not do. Now, I wouldn't say that The Secret History is without flaw. It was extremely slow paced, it took a long time to set up, and at times the satire was a bit too on the nose, especially during part 2 of the novel. The novel is divided into 3 parts. Another thing that I do find interesting is how many people try to justify the murder of Bunny by either saying that he was a Nazi, an anti-Semite, or even racist or classist, but that is not essentially the reason why the group of friends killed Bunny. The basic reason is that they are an extremely stupid group of people who committed one murder, and to cover it up committed another murder, and covered that up committed a few more crimes along the way. That's what makes The Secret History extremely interesting to not only analyze but also to discuss, is because of how Donna Tartt essentially does not justify any of the actions of her characters. She lets them be these messy human beings that you're supposed to see at face value, rather than try to find rhyme or reason behind their actions, because beyond the surface level there is no reason for their actions. That is the entire point of The Secret History. When I look at people who critique dark academia, mostly they bring up The Secret History as an example of how dark academic spheres are filled with elitism or classism. But it is a known fact that The Secret History is essentially a revenge fantasy. It is trying to critique those things such as elitism and classism, like I previously mentioned. And one of the reasons why I think most people seem to miss the satirical part of the novel is because of poor critical thinking skills and bad reading comprehension. Especially when we look at the dark academia genre as a whole, we do see that nowadays and even before, many authors try to incorporate the things that made The Secret History a fan favorite into their own novels, but they failed to incorporate the satire into their own novels, which brings me to If We Were Villains. If We Were Villains was marketed as the new Secret History. Some people even like to call it The Secret History, but better. In If We Were Villains, which is a book 200 pages shorter than The Secret History, the author tries to incorporate many themes and ideas that were perpetuated in The Secret History into her own work of fiction. But what the author fails to do is employ Donna Tartt's skills of craftsmanship and subtlety into her own novel. Truth to be told, If We Were Villains cannot be discussed without discussing The Secret History, because it is essentially a poor rip-off of the former novel. If We Were Villains is extremely tied to The Secret History, down to its theme, its plot structure, its characterization. It's more or less a very mediocre copy of The Secret History, and rather a way of Emil Rio, who I assume is a huge fan of The Secret History, trying to justify the murder of Bunny and also trying to make her favorite ship canon. In this novel, Oliver Marks has been convicted for 10 years for a crime that most people believe that he did not commit. While leaving prison, the lead detective of the case asks him to reveal the true story of the murder of one of his friends to him. When Oliver narrates the story, we as readers are transported back in time to Oliver's time at an extremely expensive and elite drama school where he himself was a student. He details to us the falling apart of his friend group when the students who were essentially casted in the same role are given new roles. So the person who played the heroic character is given a side role to play, whereas this person who usually played a side role is uplifted and put up front to act as the hero or the primary protagonist of the play. And when this happens, the students repressed feelings about each other, their envy, their resentment towards each other comes to surface and eventually leads to their falling apart. Now, both of these synopsises of the secret history and If We Were Villains sounds extremely similar because, like I mentioned, If We Were Villains is essentially a copy of the secret history with a few changes here and there. One thing that I mostly dislike is how it does not employ any of the complex characterization that the secret history has, and it does not even do anything to enrich its themes or enrich its storytelling. It was like as if the author was writing a half-assed fan fiction of her favorite novel, which I believe she was, because If We Were Villains is a fanfic at its very roots. When we talk about elitism in Dark Academia, I think in sharp contrast to the secret history, which actively criticizes these things, If We Were Villains doesn't even bother tackling those issues because it is more focused on telling its very bland story. Now, when I say a bland story, I essentially mean that it is a very poorly tied plot with an inconclusive ending. If We Were Villains has a very writing style where the author tries to sound deep but only succeeds at sounding like someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. One of the things that irked me the most is how desperately ML Rio was trying to one-up The Secret History by Donna Tartt to such a point where she forgot to develop an original story of her own, a story that stands on its own without being compared to a predecessor. Whenever someone talks of If We Were Villains, they always mention The Secret History, which I think is one of the major pitfalls of modern Dark Academia books. They try so hard to imitate the success and the talent of Donna Tartt that they forget to write an original story of their own. When we compare the two novels, it is very, very obvious that The Secret History is the superior novel here. Where The Secret History was a breath of fresh air in contemporary literary fiction, If We Were Villains, at many of its cheap copies, are an amateur attempt at trying to subvert whatever The Secret History did. If We Were Villains is also very noticeably not a work of satire, and that is where it obviously fails. When it comes to telling a story similar to The Secret History, it is essential for us to acknowledge its satirical roots, which If We Were Villains does not do at all. It is an extremely serious story, and I think that is one of the major reasons why it fails so miserably. The author ML Rio also tries to take a lot of inspiration from Shakespeare to such a point that I feel that she is trying to make her story sound more deep, her characters sound more intelligent, while she randomly quotes Shakespeare extremely out of context. To sum up this discussion, If We Were Villains is not a novel of its own, and I think no comparison can even exist between The Secret History and If We Were Villains, because it's like comparing a bulb to the sun. I truly do think that Dark Academia as a genre will never flourish unless the people let The Secret History die. Let us all accept there will never be a better Secret History. There will never be another Secret History. The Secret History is not a prototype, it is an original. For novels in the Dark Academia genre to actually be as popular and as impactful as The Secret History, I think these novels would actually have to incorporate their own themes. The authors would have to incorporate their own lived experience into the novel, rather than exploiting the experiences of another. At the end of the day, Dark Academia as a literary genre needs to grow out of the Secret History craze. Now, I don't think this is really the author's fault because they are trying their best. It is more or less the publisher's fault, who want to drive in more readers, and the only way they know how to market a book or how to draw in readers is not by sharing with the world that novel's literary merits, but by comparing it to preceding or already existing novels in that very genre or novels which are pretty same to it. This was it for today. I hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you did enjoy this discussion, leave your thoughts below in the comments. I would love to hear them and discuss further with you. Thank you for watching this video. Have a safe and nice day. Goodbye.